This will be a very how-to talk, so feel free to take notes if you want to. The first story I want to share with you guys was a call from Ben & Jerry's. It was actually Candlin Wall, who used to be a Stanford resident. She called me from Vermont and said, could you come up and help us at Ben & Jerry's invent new novelties? So what are novelties? Novelties are anything but pints, right? So it could be bonbons, or in the case of Ben & Jerry's, it would be Ben-Bens, right? Okay. Bonbons with stuff inside them, right? So I said, great, love to do that. And by the way, she said, we're going to be serving ice cream all day. And as the facilitator of that, by the end of the day, I was literally shaking. I'm not kidding. I was in sugar shock. But it was fun. And so I said, great, terrific, I'll come up. And she said, oh, there's one other thing. We'd like you to help us name a new strawberry and fudge ice cream. And I said, sure. How long have you been working on it? 3 months, because naming is hard. If you ever try to do naming and marketing, it's really hard. So I said 3 months. Okay, how much time do we have in the session? She said, a half hour. And I said, I can't do it in a half hour. She said, well, you know, I'm the client and you're not, so that's what we got, okay? So I said, okay. And the key to this thing is what? This is not brainstorming. One of the key takeaways from today is we don't want you to do brainstorming. Brainstorming has been, even though it's a generic term for coming up with ideas, it's an actual technique. The actual technique is come up with a lot of ideas and withhold judgment. So that's the 2 rules of brainstorming, right? But research has shown it really doesn't work. Right? It really doesn't work. And so this is all about ideation. So how is ideation different than brainstorming? This is a key takeaway. You can capture it in one word, and that one word is stimuli. You use stimuli to trigger the brain, right? If we go to a client, and we've been with that client, and they say, and they've been thinking about Oreo cookies for 100 years, and we go, got any ideas? Got any more ideas? They should throw us out of the room, right? Because we're not using stimuli to trigger their brains. So what stimuli did I use in this half hour to come up with a name for a new strawberry and fudge ice cream? I thought, well, what is the essence of Ben & Jerry's? And for me, the essence was they're anti-authoritarian. If you looked at some of their names, you'd agree that they are very anti-authoritarian, even from Saturday Night Live, that name which I won't mention. It's amazing, right? And so I said, what could be anti-authoritarian triggers? And I thought about it, and it was very simple. I said, well, slang is anti-authoritarian. So I got out slang dictionaries, cut them up into pieces, passed those out, had the teams working on this thing, oofus, doobie butt, V-girl, all these weird things, right? But from that, one team came up with snafu, which was strawberries naturally all fudged up. And that became the flavor they launched it under and did extremely well. So that's a good example of using stimuli to trigger new ideas. Okay, I want to talk now about this impossible thing, right? So we get strange calls, odd calls. Can you help us do X, Y, and Z? And we got one of those calls. We were working with a large management consulting firm, one of the famous ones. And they came up to us, or they called us up, and they said, we've got one of the big 3 automakers, and we'd like you to help them invent a new sales forecasting system. And I'm getting nervous now, right? Because it's not new products. And part of the takeaway for you today is that you don't use ideation techniques just for new products or naming or even advertising or promotion. You can use it for cost cutting. You can use it for efficiency. You can use it for strategy. So in this case, how do we use some kind of creative technique to help us do a better job of forecasting the sales of our cars? So what we did was, one of the techniques we use is sort of a semantic analysis technique. So the way we defined the challenge was, how do we invent a new sales forecasting system? Pretty simple, right? And what we do then is look at each of the words in that problem statement or challenge statement or opportunity statement and say, what could we do with that, all right? And one of those 2, 4, 6, 7 words below was the key. And when I ask audiences this in the keynotes, they usually guess system first. Well, it wasn't the system. You want to take a shot at this? It wasn't forecasting. It wasn't invent. It wasn't sales. And it wasn't we. And it wasn't new. All right? I was freaking out by this point, but it was actually A. So what are the assumptions inherent in A? That it's one sales forecasting system. And so the breakthrough idea came when we realized, why don't we do a bunch of these? Have one for manufacturing / production, one for sales, one for marketing, R&D, et cetera. And then over time, because they all have different needs for the sales forecast, and then justify it and get a more dynamic sales forecasting system as a result of putting them together. So that's what we did. And that was a big success. So it surprised us all, right? So next I want to talk a little about problem framing, because this is critical. We got a call from an iron company, one of the famous 100-year-old ironing companies, right? And they called us up and said, what? Can you help us invent new irons, right? And we said, great, except that's the last thing we want to do. Okay, and by the way, if you're working for a company, that's probably not what you say to your boss when he asks you to do something. You probably don't say that's the last thing we want to do. But what was behind this was, we all know what an iron is, right? An iron has got that metal plate, and it's got the handle, it's got the steam thing coming out. And so if we're going to get really breakthrough ideas, we have to think very differently, right, about irons. And this gets back to, I don't want a drill, I want a hole, right? Or the jobs to be done, or whatever you want to call it, the consumer benefit. And so we framed the challenge differently. Subtle but important. And the difference was, how do we invent a new anti-wrinkle device? Okay, and by doing that, it freed our minds up. Actually, we went even broader than that. We went to, how do we invent a new garment care device, right? But the point here was, if we had gone into that session saying, let's invent new irons, I know from experience, I'm convinced, we wouldn't have gotten nearly the number of ideas, number one, nor would they have been breakthrough by going in and how do we invent a new garment care device or a new anti-wrinkle device, okay? So the next story I want to tell was, and this is there's a technique called semantic intuition, and it's a word combination technique. And the way this technique, it was invented by Patel in Germany. The way this technique works is you sort of mash together different words, okay? And so we had an assignment both with Oreo cookie and Chips Ahoy, and we're working on the Chips Ahoy one. And so what you do is you do columns of words that you can combine. So things associated with a dessert, right? And things associated with different forms that a cookie could take. And maybe the third column is ingredients. And we started mashing those up to trigger our brains, right? It's all about triggering the brains. And so if you get brownie, layer, and walnut, this actually led to the brownie Chips Ahoy cookie. And if anybody has tasted that cookie, it's absolutely delicious. The R&D people, the food technology people, manufacturing people figured out how to put a layer of brownie inside that chocolate chip cookie. And it's been, and by the way, I heard some laughing about that. I was at the store soon after this thing launched, and a woman was buying it. And she, I had to go up to her, right, and say, why are you buying this brownie Chips Ahoy cookie? And she looked at me like I was a total idiot. I'm not, it's that idiot look we've all, and she said, it's a brownie inside of a chocolate chip cookie, right? And that was it. And sometimes these answers are very, very simple, right? Sometimes they're very simple. Now, by the way, what's happened now is because that's been such a big success, they've put in other stuff in there, right? So red velvet, birthday cake frosting. Sometimes the idea is the most simple. We had an Oreo project going on at the same time. It never occurred to us to put Oreo filling inside of the chocolate chip cookie. Ugh. And almost with good reason, right? But that product has actually done pretty well. I want to move on now to give you a technique. This is called a problem redefinition technique. And this technique, you can use it for anything. I'm going to use it for a very strange call we got to demonstrate it. We got a call from a company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's Catholic Knights Insurance Company. They've since renamed the name of that company, but what do? They'll sell life insurance to Catholics, okay? And I'm on the phone going, who is this, right? Who's calling me here? Life insurance to Catholics. And of course, you can't sell to Jews and Muslims and Buddhists. No, we only sell to Catholics. And they've actually been sued by all those groups, but their charter is held up. So that was our problem challenge. How do we sell more life insurance to Catholics? Oh boy. The way you do this technique is you look for a subject, which would be what? The we, right? The verb, which would be sell, right? And the object could either be life insurance to Catholics. They weren't going to reinvent their life insurance offerings, so we picked Catholics, okay? So that was our problem challenge. Then what you do is you go under each one of these and you come up with different options. So who else could the we, who's typically the we? It's the sales force, right? But now you come up with different options. So maybe the clergy, maybe friends of Catholics, churchgoers, family members, etc. All these people could help them sell life insurance. Is that right? Yes. Okay. How about sell? This is thinking more broadly about the word sell. License, giveaway, test run, co-market, telemarket, etc. So you come up with options there. And the third one, is a Catholic a Catholic a Catholic? Well, kind of yes and no. You can kind of segment that a little bit, right? So maybe Catholic doctors, the Vatican, the millennial Catholics, we got the Pope in there, Hispanic Catholics, etc. Okay? So now you've got these lists, right? Now what do? It's sort of Mad Libs. Chinese menu time, right? So you pick, we usually have them pick 3 in each column. So friends of Catholics, board members, policyholders. We just pick those 3. Second column, be incentivized, license, and reward. Third column, Catholic grandparents, Catholic schools, and the Vatican. All right, so we got those. Then what do? You redefine your challenge. So how do friends of Catholics be incentivized to sell more life insurance to Catholic grandparents, right? Okay? And then how do board members do the licensing of life insurance to Catholic schools? And finally, how do we get policyholders to reward the selling of life insurance to the Vatican? Obviously, some of these don't work, right? Clearly, on the third, what do you do with that? But that's not the point, right? The point is, if you get a new idea, you got it, right? And so this company, they had come out of the world, of quality, and so they were extremely rigorous about these combinations. They literally came up with thousands of combinations of these things. And so, one of the ideas, for instance, was if we go to Catholic schools, could we, if a certain number of people signed up for our life insurance, a certain number of families, then we would donate equipment, athletic equipment and computers, for instance. Another one was go to Catholic grandparents. If they have a new kid that's recently been, a grandchild that's recently been born, maybe they gift some life insurance to the parents, et cetera, et cetera. So about 9 months later, after we did this work, the CMO wrote me, and he said, and this is about a $100 million company at the time, they said, we have increased our sales by 52% using this technique. So this was an unsolicited feedback from him. So what is the takeaway from that? I clearly undercharged, right? but beyond that, the takeaway is that if you do these combinations, you can come up with ideas, even for something as hard as selling life insurance to Catholics, right? Okay, and maybe even a broader. The point is you could use this for anything. Anytime you have a subject, verb, and object. By the way, if you have 10 in each column, how many different combinations would you have to redefine this challenge? I've asked this of finance people, and they've said anywhere from a lot to 100, and it makes me nervous because it's 1,000, right? It's 10 to the third power, 10 times 10 times 10. If you have 20 in each column, you get 8,000, right? Okay, so that's the problem redefinition technique. The last technique I want to share with you, this sounded really rough when I got the call. We got a call from the New York ASPCA, American Society of Prevention of Cruelty in Animals, and they said, we have a real marketing challenge. It's really tough. The New York police are giving us all these pit bulls that had been abused by drug dealers. And can you help us get New York families to adopt ex-drug dealers' pit bulls? So what we did was they're different techniques. They're questioning techniques, they're metaphor techniques, they're visual techniques, and there's a whole realm of fantasy techniques. So we did a fantasy technique. We had developed a technique called worst idea, where you come up with not good ideas, but bad ideas, and then you flip it, okay? We did not do that because we said, oh, you could kill the dog, and all this weird stuff. So we changed that. We adapted that a little bit to say, come up with a silly idea. A silly idea, and that was gangbusters. And so some of the silly ideas was maybe you could do a virtual adoption, right? Set up cameras, and people might fall in love with a dog and actually adopt them. I went and, quote, met a bunch of these pit bulls, and I wanted to bring one home, I got to tell you. Of course, my wife would have freaked out. We have a Havapoo, so that's probably breakfast for the pit bull. But another idea was dress them up in costumes and march them in the Greenwich Village Halloween parade. And a third one, which I thought was silly and really fun, was let's take them out for a walk up to New York and say, "Would you mind holding my dog for a second?" And then run away. Okay. So they didn't do that. But the net of all this was really cool. They realized that they should be personifying these animals and really showing what their personality was. And that led to the national campaign, which has really helped them place more dogs. Okay? My call to action is here. This is not rocket science. I want you to learn these techniques, right, and use them in whatever you're doing. It could be at work, in your personal life, whatever, because they work. I mean, we've helped companies come up with over $3 billion of stuff. And I've written 3 books, but there are a lot of books out there. They're not hard to learn. And frankly, even if you do them poorly, right, it's better than saying, got any ideas, got any more ideas. Last trick I will give you. I featured this in my last book. Because of the Internet of Things now, if you have a passion for something, you can take a concrete object, whatever it is, gardening, it could be a chair, a pen, it doesn't matter, put the word smart in front of that. Whatever it is, and I guarantee you, you will get a new invention. And if you doubt that, look at the telemarketing, or the telephonic company, I won't mention it. What do? They have a commercial out there on what? Smart asphalt. So if we can do smart asphalt, you can do something else. Thank you.